some mentality and philosophy. I represent the company whose dream, let me put it this way, is to empower local entrepreneurs to start their businesses and do an actual change in the local markets. And we had a wonderful discussion. Even this morning, I met Mr. Locke, who was one of the organizers of the conference. And of course, whenever people who dedicate their lives to ride-hailing, we meet, we talk about ride-hailing nonstop, even in a very informal way. And the thing is that what he found useful from the presentation I was making on this conference was that so many people were grateful that there are chances to start small, because so many dream to start big right away. We also had the same topic continuing here with Pavel today, because everybody wants big, quick successes right there and now, like done already yesterday. But it takes actually a lot of working, a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, a lot of learning, a lot of mistakes, sometimes, drawbacks, whatever, everything. It's not a direct line to success. It's a learning curve. And what Onde would like or would hope to be doing is to take away the worries about the technical solution, and whereas the entrepreneurs can actually dedicate their time and efforts to work and not thinking about how to run business technically. We do have that agenda now, but I think we can rearrange it according to how we go. It's okay, no worries. It's actually wonderful. I like the music. I think we'll just do everything before the coffee break. Then we'll have the coffee break just to enrich ourselves, not only data-wise, but physically. And then we'll be able to leave. Don't need to stay here till... okay, this is an interesting time. I have just noticed it. Okay. I introduced myself. I also have my colleague Alexandra. She's right there. She speaks Chinese. She tells me not to say it to people, but she does. She spent one whole year in China learning. Yeah, I know you've talked already. See, you already know that. So yes, and of course, Mr. Amit. And okay, so whenever we are approached by entrepreneurs, they have their doubts what to do first, whether, especially when it comes to how to run an app, where to get an app, whether to develop it in-house, whether to purchase a ready-made solution, whether to come to companies like we represent Onde, right? Like white label type of solutions. There's so many pros and cons. I'll tackle some of them just to let you know. Okay, you've already made the right decision, I think. But nevertheless, let's just discuss what other options we have. These are some of the figures that we run and very proud of. We have helped so many companies to launch, some to be extremely successful, like Stroll Guam is here. We also have companies who've managed to become even bigger than Uber in their respective regions. We are really proud of being a part of these data stories. Onde consists of basically everything that any entrepreneur needs to launch an app or to launch a successful ride-hailing business. We have the customer app, driver app, operator app, My Hub, which is the administrative app that runs the business on the background, where you can access all your reports and the data, and the web app that can be easily integrated with the third-party providers. So basically, however you envision your business to run, it can be done with the Onde. And this is important, especially for Asia, because we know that a lot of people are still very traditional, even though the level of digitalization and mobile phone usage is relatively high and it's still growing. But there are rural areas, not that developed areas, where people still prefer to use phones to order their services or anything. The operator app gives that opportunity as well. So there's no choice either or. It can all be done within the same system. So basically, it has everything that one needs in order to start a business, and just think about actually running a business and not, I am really love our designers. Okay. Oh my, okay, that's interesting. Sasha, I think you gave me the wrong file, but it's gonna be cool. Yes. Okay. Let's do it this way, and basically, I'm gonna be talking. Okay, most of the time. So, few options that anyone has to run a business. You can come and partner with an existing company. Let's say Bolt, InDrive, Yandex, whoever, like Uber. The pro of that is that they have an established brand. They have all the processes. Most of the time, they will cover everything on the governmental side. You will have a steady flow of orders and expect it simply to be covering them. There's a catch. Nobody will know you personally, not your brand, not your service. You will not be distinguished. You will simply be a part of an existing story. Sometimes it's also a really good way to do and to go, especially for small companies that have no, I don't want to call it have no ambition, but nevertheless have no intention of huge success stories or whatever. They just want to provide a steady service so they can join these big brands, and it's absolutely a workable solution. Sometimes entrepreneurs, they have such an important idea, an idea that they really believe in and dedicate their hearts and souls and sweats and tears to, that for them it's important to be established as a brand on the market and deliver their voices and their services to the market. For them, they can, of course, come and establish their own brand. And the way to do that is also several options. So you can purchase an already existing solution, let's say source code of any solution. There are so many like software providers who can do that. You can order a custom-made service. Amit went this road once. He can tell you more later of all pros and cons of that particular aspect. I know that especially for some generations, it's important to own things. We've basically been growing with an idea that you can only be actually successful or can feel the possession of something if you own it. So that ownership, the demand for ownership, has been embedded somewhere very deep in our roots and genes. But what's interesting is that ownership actually creates such a burden that you have to run it, you have to maintain it, you have to spend so much resources making sure it does everything that it has to be doing, that at the end of the day, you might lose yourself. What exactly am I here for? Whether to make sure that the apps are running or make sure that the drivers are coming for the orders that the riders are placing. And in that, and again, I'm not saying anything is better or good. I'm just saying that you need to understand what are the pros and cons. And at some point, of course, it makes sense to run your own unique app, especially if you are providing something that is absolutely different from everybody else on the market, or that you've reached a certain level of the size of the business, let's say global, that running your own app would make more sense than running it on somebody else's platform. We've seen cases like that. We had partners like that who started with us for 4, 5, 6 years. They reached really big numbers on their respective markets. Let's say we have partner Pasap, if you've ever been to Cambodia. The company has been one of the huge providers there. They've grown with us, but then they said, we are really grateful, but now we want to go our separate ways, which we said, great. And by the way, for at least a year, they've developed their own front end, but they run their front end on our back end for more than a year, which is also a possibility. So the ways we can cooperate is quite extensive. And of course, we had companies who grew to the size that they were successful and happy to sell it off and just enjoy the free time now. And it's not only Stroll Guam. We had the same partner, well, the same story in Oman. The company, hi, come on in. Welcome. The company, Taxi in Oman was sold to Russian provider, Yandex.Go. They're running the service now. And with these stories are also possible. So just decide what works for you. And it's interesting, by the way, for China, because we were discussing with Lok. I was surprised because I only knew about Didi in China, of course, and Didi has, 75% of the market share currently in China. But the interesting part was that there are over 300 other platforms that are run in China. And for me, it was like, okay, do they all have enough place on the market? But then I remembered the population of China. I was like, okay, they definitely do have enough place on the market and there's so much more to do. But what it is important is that to have access to software that can empower you right from the start and allow you to grow small, not necessarily be big right away, and because the proprietary software that requires that. Because whenever and this is a low margin business, right? So we need to identify the channels of where we direct our investments. And if you go with a proprietary solution, believe me, your first channel of investment will be that, as opposed to marketing, promotion, and driver and rider acquisition. So tons of opportunities, but those who Andreas here, he have chosen, I think, wise. But nevertheless, several options are possible. I would really love to have those slides up there, but I don't. So you know what? Let's move on to more of a Q&A session, okay? If you don't, Sasha, do you want me to stay here with the microphone or can I move there and be more? Huh?
The microphone is over.
Oh, no, then this will go.
There are two more microphones here. Wireless ones.
Okay, so let's do more this Q&A session. I think most of you were with us on the conference, right? Were you also participating in the conference? Okay, then you are up for a treat here because you can listen more to Amit's story. The rest we've been lucky enough to hear it yesterday on the conference. But let's talk about what, at which point did you understand that having the proprietary software, as I said, Amit started with the proprietary software that developed custom-made. At which point, what was this ticking point that you've decided, okay, enough is enough, and I need to switch from that to a working, steady solution that would allow me to dedicate my time elsewhere?
So, how I came to that was during mic test. Okay, so I came to that conclusion really because of COVID, to be honest. And I was thinking it for a while because we were actually also building our food delivery product at that time. And when COVID hit, it was like, all right, all the plans go out the window. It's sort of like that Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan till you get punched in the face. So we definitely got punched in the face. And what I thought about was, okay, I had to sort of start from scratch again. That was the mentality. And I said, if I had to do it all over again, how would I do this? And so I thought about technology first, that if that's not consistent and reliable, then everything else in the business really doesn't matter. Because you can't go out there and funnel customers because you're not going to be confident of your product. You'll be able to funnel drivers, but then, every day they're going to show up and create a nightmare for you. And trust me, dealing with disgruntled drivers is a pain. I don't think you want to go through that. So I had to really think about it. And I said, if we can have a really solid technology, then everything would work. And I was also one of those founders that in the beginning, I want to say I put a lot of value in owning your own IP. And I quickly realized that that's not really the case. It's your business is what's valuable. So in this sense, it's the book of business. It's how many drivers you have, what's your existing customer base, your partnerships. That's the actual value. And during the conference, I was explaining to some people that an app is sort of like a storefront. Anybody can go out there and rent a storefront, and that's just one piece of the equation. It's really what goes on in that storefront. What products are you selling? What's the customer experience? How does your staff feel in that storefront? So I make that comparison because I really think that's the mentality you should go by. So I made that choice, and instantly I was actually able to focus on what really matters instead of, I'll tell you, I used to have problems of having to run our own server. And when that server goes down, everything stops. And you have to wait for it to reset. And it takes about, quickest time frame is like 30 to 40 minutes. And during that time, there's no activity. So people can try to book rides. They're really mad. The drivers, they're more mad because they're like, hey, I'm not even able to make money at this point. So didn't have to deal with that. And then you have, customer reviews that, oh, great idea, but not able to execute on it. So making that change definitely helped us. And we saw the growth. The numbers don't lie. And the customers came to us and said, we see the difference. And I really realized it's not the app per se. It's one piece of the equation. And I think when I started, which was around 2015 and launched operations 2016, my mentality was, I have to own this. Because if I don't own it, then what's the value in having it? Instead of thinking about, all right, if I don't own it, can I still have a really valuable business? And my parents actually work in the textile industry. And one of the things I thought about was, we don't have to own the factory to have a successful clothing business. And so it's very similar to that, where we just need to work with the factory. And they know what they're doing, and they're experts at what they do because they do it every day. Whereas we just need the product from them, and we can work together to achieve the same goals.
Thank you. By the way, the uptime, downtime parameter is one of the things that usually people don't think right from the start. They compare features, they compare technology, but that aspect, together with the payment gateways and all of that, comes a little bit later on, but that actually can become a deciding factor whether the business succeeds or not. We actually not once, we do it every year, but nevertheless, I'll share some figures that happened once. We've estimated the whole uptime of our system, and by the end of 2024, the number was 99.97% uptime, but that three. What's that in English? I know it's in Russian, but that three missing points to. We've calculated it costed our partners around $100,000 globally. That's just a little downtime number that really had an impact. For some more, of course, if they are running a very steady and very intense operations, for some less, if they don't have such a steady flow of orders. But nevertheless, being able to actually calculate what it costs for you to have a downtime. That's huge. And again, but this is something that usually people start thinking only after they've experienced it, only after they've seen what impact it has, but never before. So before, we all want those flashy, beautiful things, but what actually is that makes the business survive, those things are usually not very fun and flashy, but they are crucial. So the next thing that I personally think one of the crucial things is to find the balance between how many riders you need to have for how many drivers you need to have on shift. And finding that balance is something that has sort of becoming one of for our company a Northern Star sort of equation. How did you approach that particular thing? How were you identifying how many drivers you needed to have for how many riders you had, or the other way?
So actually, ever since the beginning, I'm glad that we actually found a formula of every time we added a driver, how many rides that would bring to the company. So I think it was, Guam's a bit of a smaller market, only 170,000, 180,000 people, tourists from Korea and Japan, and of course a large military presence. Mm-hmm. So what we actually figured out was, I think it was about, if we added a driver, that would bring us an extra 20 to 30 rides per week. And once we figured that out, I was like, okay, if we want to hit this certain number, then we know what to bring on. And, it's always a question of who's more important, riders or drivers. They're both important. It's supply and demand. You don't want to have a lot of supply and no demand because, when people are wanting to work and then there's no jobs coming to them, you're going to really see, smiles turn upside down, and it's tough to deal with. And then on the other side of it is you don't want a crazy demand that you can't fulfill. So this is a sort of product and service where if you can't meet the demand, the customer is not like, oh, I wasn't able to get a ride today, man. I want to get it. Makes me want to use them even more. That's what like sort of streetwear clothing brands do, right? They have a limited quantity of clothes, and when they see it sold out on the website, they're like, oh, wow, next time there's a release, I definitely have to be first in line. This is not that sort of business.
Oh, no.
Right. And the question I used to always get in the beginning was, Amit, how come you don't really market or, spend on advertising a lot to get people to use it? And I said, well, the thing is, you have to have the supply for it. So in the beginning, I used to tell people, let's say I had an ad in the movie theater. And everybody who was in that, watched that movie, let's say 50%, not even 100%, but 50% of them are like, you know what? After this, I'm going to use Stroll. If we're not able to fulfill that, why are we going to put ourselves in that position? And I think that's why in this business, you have to understand that in the beginning, there is a time period of growth that before you really do anything, you have to slowly grow. And of course, if you have the finance and you've raised enough capital, then if you want to go full-fledged and have all these crazy driver incentives, onboarding tactics, bonuses, and all these discount codes for riders, you could do that, but not many people have that luxury. So I always say strong trees take time to grow. So you got to, in the beginning, at least the first 6 months to a year, you have to give it time, and you don't want to get discouraged by other players in the market who've been there longer, spent more capital than you, and think, oh, I'm not doing what they're doing, and if I look like this smaller guy. But at the end of the day, it's about numbers. It's about your financials.
Cool. Thank you. We have maybe I've been spending too much time discussing that driver versus passenger ratio and balance and everything. We now don't ever even quote the hen and egg dilemma. We now call it riders and drivers dilemma, because it's always been like that, like who comes first, who comes when, and what to spend on for especially first. But okay, if you'd be starting that business now, what would you spend your first acquisition capital on?
Well, since the ride-hailing market is a bit more mature, especially a lot more mature than 10 years ago, what I would focus is what are current drivers' pain points? What are they looking for now that's maybe not available in the current marketplace? I think that's where I would start. The second part of the equation is definitely customers. I would also look at them and say, what is the pain point that they're dealing with that they want solved? And I like to think of drivers as actually like another customer segment for the company. I don't just look at them as supply. I sort of look at them now as like salespeople that as a company, we want to be able to equip them with as much tools and strategy and a playbook as possible to make these certain sales. And if they're able to be successful in closing deals, per se, if they were salespeople, then of course the company would benefit. So looking at it from that perspective, I think that's what I would do right now. And I would also do it in a way of, okay, the market size is really huge, especially in Thailand, Southeast Asia. So you don't need to be Grab. You don't need to be Bolt. I mean, you could try. I don't know if that's going to be successful for you because let me ask you guys, do most of you know that Grab is not profitable or they just got profitable, I think about last year, right? And that, yeah, so they've been in the market for how long and they just became profitable last year. But of course, to a average customer, you see them all around, you see all their ads, and you think, wow, they're making quite a bit of profit. No. So you have to keep that in mind when you build your business because as someone who's now an investor and someone who's looking to also acquire companies, I look at profitability and how you're able to achieve that, but maybe not having as much market share. I think that's more of a wow than, hey, you know what, let's just keep raising money and burn billions and billions of dollars and hopefully one day it'll all make sense. So I look at it that now that you don't have to have this $1 billion unicorn model to win. And I look at companies like Bolt, for example. I don't think Bolt is ever trying to be number one in Southeast Asia because they know that to achieve that, it's going to take a lot and you're going to have to just spend this capital that's really can make you look the part. But, you know, if you look behind the scenes and you look at your balance sheet, it's going to be quite scary.
I wonder if I'm correct, or maybe if someone has a more accurate data, please correct me. It took even Uber more than 10 years to
Correct.
reach at least, like balance, let's say, not even profitability. I don't think they've ever been profitable. Have they ever been?
I think around about a year, 2 years ago, but I also
But they've been like, almost 15 years minimum, right? When they're in the market.
And I don't think people also understand what's the certain strategy that these investors play sometimes. So let's say you get into a Series B and you invest at that stage. Then when Series C, D, E comes in, these sort of investors have the opportunity to profit on their investment without actually seeing the company become profitable. So it's also a way for them to have their own, needs met per se, their financial goals.
I agree 100%. The thing is, we also have a saying that these companies are already too big to fail. So those financial institutions would not even let them fail, even if they have been negative for years and years and years and they've been burning the capital. But so many government level of institutions have been involved with their activities that they would never be allowed to fail. Even though we've seen cases where they were leaving the markets, because again, at the end of the day, even they can reach a certain level that they cannot continue burning that capital anymore.
Definitely. And I know someone who's actually close to Anthony Tan from Grab, CEO and founder. And he actually comes from a very reputable family in the automotive space in Malaysia. His own parents weren't willing to give him investment because they said, no, you have to join our family business. We're doing so well. he got a huge investment from his grandmother, and he burned $10 million like that, maybe in about a year or less, because he understood that to get that sort of market share at that stage of the game, you just have to keep burning money and burning money. And this was before, I want to say this is when money was more affordable, because like the bank interest rates were much lower, much less. Whereas now these sort of investors are not going to just throw money at an idea and think that, oh, it's going to work. You have to have a proof of concept, and they rather see you have an actual pathway to profitability than say, hey, you know what, we're making more revenue every month and every quarter, so that's what matters. And because we're having an increase in revenue every quarter, we'll be able to get profitable some way, somehow. I think that sort of mentality is out the window.
Exactly. And I think the tendencies that we've started seeing, and I think Guam is actually one of the examples. We had other cases, but this integration with different level. So we have the supply chain, the whole, let's say, so many industries are actually interconnected. If you think about it, who has to be like involved in order to deliver the service? And we started seeing that now it's not only just providing the ride hailing, now it's more of finding the combination. And when Stroll was purchased, it was done by the auto distributor, right? We've seen that other manufacturers are now using ride hailing as their let's say other channel of distribution. So combining different revenue sources in one has been the recent tendencies. It's not just ride hailing anymore. It's finding what can else be included in the supply chain in order to reach that. But do you know how actually Stroll is, well, it's now the other name, but how are they doing now? Do you know?
So they still have the name Stroll.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if they gave that name up, especially, it was too good of a name to give up, to be quite honest.
But I think they did. Triple J was there?
No,
I think
so,
they at least tried to.
no. So they still have the name. It's just under. They made a whole new division of their company called Triple J Technologies, because they also have a EV part in that side of their business. So they did keep the name. They did keep the logo, pretty much everything. And I think they're doing quite well. And now I still do some consulting for them here and there. And it's all about really bringing intrinsic value to their existing business and having these sort of integrations. Like, I know some people in the audience are from CPs, and I've actually had a lot of ideas on how to work with that sort of group, and using ride hailing as a product that's an extension of these businesses, whether you're a car manufacturer, whether you're an auto dealership, or whether ride hailing can be a business that's in a portfolio. So, for example, what I've been telling people is, look at this hotel. It's owned by Central Group, which is one of the biggest financial power families in Thailand. And what I like to think is, at this hotel, everybody is using, I'm guessing, Grab, Bolt, taxis. And really, if Central or any other hotel provided that option, the amount of data they would get about their guests would be incredible. And they would know about their experience. Imagine if they knew, okay, these certain guests that leave at this time in the morning, they're going to this area. And then when they want to come back, you can still have that better customer experience, guest experience, where you can interact with them. So I think now ride hailing there's a lot of ways to get creative with it. And that's something I'm exploring right now. I'm talking with a bunch of different companies on building ride hailing solutions for them. And I know there's people here from China that are CP, and I'm definitely looking forward to connecting on that space. And I even can see that telcos are wanting to get involved in this space. So, and the reason people are like, why would they want to? It's because it's another solution that they can easily funnel their customers to.
that is the gray area for me. And even yesterday, there were some discussions on the panel regarding the data collection, the data analysis, and how to get more information and insights and how to use it for different purposes. And for me, I even raised my hand and asked a question because that creates a very weird situation where users now are actually not that open to share their data, and they're not open to be even suggested things to, especially when they haven't asked. Maybe it's more European mentality, but nevertheless, this is something where, also a steady tendency of the data protection, while we still want to have access to the data in order to reuse it. And again, finding a balance. How is that working in your mind? How would you see it working?
I think it depends on what data points you pick from, as long as it's not too intricate. That's what I like to think. So I know we were discussing before, and with Locke as well, is that I don't know if many people know, but Uber, what they used to do is they used to know what percentage of your phone battery you had on your phone. And so if they knew that you only had 2 or 3%, they were going to make your ride a lot more expensive because they knew you didn't have the time to wait 5-10 minutes for the price to go down. So I don't believe in getting that sort of data points, but I do believe in if you can take away some data pieces that actually help the customers, that actually help the drivers, I think everybody benefits. And so, like we had in-app tablets in our cars, and people would say, oh, like what data are you sharing? And it wasn't crazy data. It was, data of like how many rides we do, which areas, which time. And when it came to dividing the demographics of our customers, we didn't have a fully known idea of, oh, this person is here at this age. We didn't do that. I mean, we could have, but then we didn't want to get too complicated. So because we had a rough estimate of knowing who these customers were, we were able to actually target them pretty well and able to combine a outdoor ad experience with the digital call to action experience, which at that time was not available. So I think it works really well. And I think data is useful. I think consumers now understand that it's kind of too late to go back, to be quite honest, of, oh, you know what, you can't know anything about me, because the less they know about you, the more they can make things convenient for you as well.
Agree. Okay, but this is still an interesting thing. By the way, do you mind if I go a little bit frivolous and ask Andres to join this topic? Because I think you're planning to launch a limousine business, right? Do you think you would be combining that particular service with anything else? Let's say, I don't know, maybe more tourism-oriented advice or recommendations, anything?
Our target group is like business corporates, like lawyers or real estate agents, something like 1-3%. Customers that have some clients flying in from abroad, showing around, nice vehicle, but if you are a real estate agent, he's showing some bundles, some investor wants to buy something, needs to have a nice vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lawyer, you also need to buy something. Something like that. And this is like one like business model we not get to those clients. And the other might be tourism clients. But I see it like it's a two-step for us. I would like just to because I know tourism is there's a lot of there is great. There's so much going on in this start.
Okay, but interesting, especially when you said flying in and maybe showing around. Would you be making these sort of requirements for the drivers that you will be onboarding to be, let's say, proficient in English? Okay.
So we're looking for drivers that are fluent in Thai and good in English.
Mm-hmm.
And we are also looking for drivers which can. I don't want to sell to tell.
Oh no, of course, whatever, of course.
Not only driving someone from A to B.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Makes total sense.
Absolutely, of course. Thank you for sharing. By the way, would you like some water? Because I've been, shooting those questions at you.
Sure.
Yes. Okay,
Always.
cool. Anyone else would like some water, maybe? Again, please, let's make it as informal as we can, just for everybody. Huh? Yes. Yes. And I think you can join me asking questions. So if you have anything for me or for Mr. Amit, again, we don't have to be here till the very end. Let's just make it an enjoyable experience. Anyone has any questions? Sure.
Thanks, first of all, for sharing yesterday and today. Really
Thank you.
admire your success story. So, following up the previous conversation with Natalie about the ICP, so I'm really curious. Could you mention that pivotal moment of your entrepreneurial journey when you decided, aha, I want to start a regular business, not selling flowers, not working at a factory, right?
Okay, actually, you know what? I should have mentioned this in my talk yesterday, but I really want to make sure I covered a certain point. So, my background is actually, I want to say, really unorthodox. I don't like to use the word unique because I'm sure there's someone out there with the
But
same
it
background.
is unique. Okay,
Sure.
you can use it.
So, I'm actually a audio engineer and music producer by trade, and so I was in LA when Uber was first coming up, and I took it as a rider, and I was like, oh wow, this is a crazy experience, right? Like wow, okay. And in LA, it's not a really taxi heavy market. It's actually a real pain to deal with taxis, and no one actually really use it as compared to like New York per se. So then from there, I think it was really like how the universe worked. I went to the Bay Area and I was staying at my friend's place, and somehow, some way, they got a mail, like a pamphlet from Uber in the mail, and I was like, oh, how to become a driver, and it looked like a sort of booklet, like you know when you buy a vehicle and it has like about like the model, the vehicle, the colors, and the interior. So it looked something like that. So it was intriguing. I was like, oh, this is how it works. That's interesting. And then I went, and every time I got into an Uber at that point, and even a Lyft, I would say, ask the drivers, oh, what is your experience like? And I got mixed reviews. Some people are like, I love it. And some people are like, I don't really like doing this, but here I am. So I said, you know what, let me try this out. So I tried it out for a while. Wasn't really doing it to make income per se. It was more of, let me just see how this is. And then one day, I was driving back from downtown LA to the valley where I lived, which is about like a 20-30 minute drive from downtown. And I said, okay, you know what? Where I'm from, Guam, this service would make a lot of sense. So in the beginning, I was like, how do I bring Uber and Lyft there? And then quickly, I don't know, when that drive to my place, I'll never forget. It was like my mind was just going, how do I do this, this? And so quickly when I got home, I was like, you know what? Why would I need to bring Uber or Lyft? Because the actual technology and business model is not proprietary. So then I started to think, okay, if I built my own, what would it look like? And at that time, my really good friend, I would say like my best friend, spoke to him about the idea, and I said, you know, I don't know how to make an app. I don't know how to do all that. He's like, you know what? Your family's from Thailand. Why don't you get an app developer from there? So I said, that makes sense. So I just started doing my homework. I always tell people I graduated from Google University, YouTube University, and that's how I connected the dots. And yeah, just one thing led to another. That's how I got started.
So you hired an initial team in Thailand?
Correct. Yeah, I hold a developer team in Thailand. And so what I did was I actually really bet on myself. I don't know if I would do that again now, but I'm glad I did. I basically took all my savings, all my earnings from the music industry, whether as a music producer, audio engineer, did some songwriting, all of that, and put it into this. And yeah, then I realized that, you know what, I'm not Uber, I'm not Grab, and eventually if I run out of money, then there's no Stroll. So then I had to make the pivot in 2020. I think everybody had to make some sort of pivot in their lives. And yeah, from there, it just grew because even people ask me like, how did you come up with the name? So Stroll is actually already like a sort of slang people used in Guam. And why I use it was I want to come up with a name that can be used as both a noun and a verb, like Uber, like Grab. And we use black and yellow. Why? Just because subconsciously you would think of taxi without saying taxi. So it was really a lot of thought that went into this, and that's how one thing led to another. So I never imagined getting into this space, but that's how life works, I guess.
So yes, his example definitely not helping identifying the ideal customer profile of who would want to launch a taxi business or ride hailing. But it's a wonderful story.